Liz Truss, thank you very much for coming. And while this is obviously a celebration, I have to tell you a few home truths. While you and your colleague have been on a 5-week beauty parade, people in this room have seen inflation go to the highest rate for 40 years, energy bills go to nearly £4,000, wages are down by 4%, mortgages will soar, the NHS doesn't have enough ambulances in some parts of the country, or enough doctors, and bizarrely, despite downpours, I'm not allowed to water my garden. This is a zombie government. You're a senior representative. You've done nothing for the last 5 weeks, have you?
Well, I've been working as Foreign Secretary.
I think there's some support for that idea.
I have been working as Foreign Secretary, Nick. And of course, we face problems, and many of the problems you've talked about, like inflation, are problems that we face as a result of COVID, as a result of the war in Ukraine. I'm proud of what we've done to take on Vladimir Putin, to help the Ukrainians fight this war for freedom and democracy. And of course, we need to continue to do that to end this war, which is partly the reason we're seeing such high energy prices. So the government absolutely is functioning. I am part of that government, but what we're here today to talk about is who is the next Prime Minister, which is going to take place within the next week.
To those who say you've perhaps focused a little bit too much on Ukraine and are not enough on Uxbridge, how would you reply?
Well, I'm the Foreign Secretary, so my job is to focus on key foreign affairs issues, and I've been focusing on delivering on the Northern Ireland Protocol, so restoring the primacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, dealing with the issue perpetrated by Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, and dealing with numerous other foreign affairs issues. And that's my responsibility. And I have continued to support our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, in that time.
But if in a few days, yes, do please, we want as much audience reaction, do join in. And indeed, of course, the people listening on LBC and the Global Player then can pick up on your reaction, because you are all live on the Global Player and you're live on LBC Radio. If you're the Prime Minister in a few days' time, I have to bring you to some domestic matters, though, Liz Truss. You'll be aware that 15 minutes from where we are now, an 87-year-old man was fatally stabbed in his mobility scooter. In Liverpool, a 9-year-old girl was fatally shot in her home. There have been 68 killings in London, an even greater number in Birmingham per capita. You now get mugged in London if you have an expensive watch. Liz Truss, the Conservative Party has gone from being the one of law and order to crime and no punishment, hasn't it?
Well, as I mentioned in my speech, Nick, I do think Sadiq Khan has not done enough to combat crime in London. And we have seen appalling crimes perpetrated. We've seen too much focus by the police on issues that don't concern the public. And I want our police to spend their time policing our streets. We will deliver on the 20,000 new police officers we've promised. I would introduce league tables so we can compare how forces are doing at delivering on stopping crime. But if you remember, Nick, when the current Prime Minister was Mayor of London, he did a very good job of tackling crime.
He did.
So we need a Mayor of London who is actually prepared to be tough on crime, and I'm afraid we don't have that in Sadiq Khan.
Should his responsibility involved in policing the metropolis, should that be removed or reviewed? That is to say, the Commissioner reports direct to the Home Secretary, who reports directly to you. Liz Truss,
well, I see a lot of support for that because of the identity of the current mayor. But I think when you do have a good mayor, such as Boris Johnson, who is cracking down on crime, I believe the best decisions are made locally. And one of the points I've been making about the planning system is I don't want to see house building decisions taken in Whitehall. I want to see them taken by local communities. And what we have to do is we have to get Sadiq Khan out of office. That is the way that we will deal with this issue. But what the government can do is they can provide more information to the public about exactly what isn't happening on crime in London, and that's what I would aim to do through league tables.
And just moving you a little bit out of London, because there's a chance that people could have come here from Hertfordshire and Essex and Kent and elsewhere. Do you support the... I've got one of them right. Do you support the idea... I haven't got time to do each one. Do you support the idea of local police commissioners?
I do. I support the idea of police and crime commissioners. Well, I think it varies from area to area, but I've seen the impact in Norfolk of our police and crime commissioner. It's positive, and people know who they are. Before, we had these police and crime, I think they were called boards, but nobody knew who they were. So I do support direct elections for police and crime commissioners. I think they're a good thing, but what we need is much more transparency about what the police are actually delivering and how they're performing compared to other forces. And we had the same situation in schools. In the 1980s, there were just rumours about whether schools were good or bad. We didn't have league tables. We didn't know how kids were performing in their O-levels or GCSEs. Now we have league tables. People know exactly how good their school is. I think we need the same for the police.
One final question on crime, Liz Truss. Are you in favour of police officers dancing the Macarena, taking the knee and painting their fingernails? That's male officers.
Well, their priority should be fighting crime and dealing with the issue.
Can they dance the Macarena?
They can dance the Macarena in their spare time.
And Liz Truss said they can dance the Macarena in their spare time. Let's move on to the energy crisis. We must talk about this. If you are Prime Minister next week, Liz Truss, you'll know this cap has gone from, I'll give the figures again, someone says when, £1,971 to £3,549. Some estimates say it's headed towards £6,000. In practical terms, what do you plan to do if you're there next week?
So, first of all, I will make sure we're not taking money from people in tax and then giving it back to them in handouts.
Can you
so
say...
my first approach will be to reverse the national insurance increase, not have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy, so people immediately see reductions in their fuel bills. My second priority is increasing the supply of energy to the UK. The fact is, we should have made decisions years ago about nuclear power. We should be using more of the resources in the North Sea. We should be doing fracking in areas where local communities support it. And we should be moving forward to secure our supply.
Okay.
And I'm afraid by successive governments, there have been too much short-term decisions that have left Britain dependent on the global energy price.
Okay.
And because of the war in Ukraine, and it's vital we end that war, and ending that war will, of course, help alleviate this situation, the United Kingdom has been exposed to global energy prices. So dealing with supply is the second thing I would do. And the third thing, of course, and this would be a matter for the Chancellor in the budget or fiscal event or whatever people like to call it,
You're the Prime Minister.
A fiscal event is a budget. So anyway, in a fiscal event,
right,
the Chancellor would address the issue of household support.
Would you cut VAT from 20 to 15%?
I am not going to predict what a putative Chancellor, I'm not ruling things in and out. I am not sitting here writing a future budget or fiscal event.
Is VAT too high currently?
You're just asking the same question in a different way.
Okay. Let me ask you something else. You're absolutely right.
Nick, I know your tricks.
In 2019, listeners to my LBC show heard one Boris Johnson say, "There will be no new taxes, read my lips." Can you say tonight, read my lips, no new taxes on your administration, please?
Yes, no new taxes.
No new taxes. I mentioned Boris Johnson. Recently, he had the worst approval rating since the Second World War for a British Prime Minister. But last week, in a poll of Tory supporters, he scored 49% and you scored 18%. What does that say about you, Liz Truss?
Well, I believe that with hindsight, Boris Johnson will be viewed as a hugely consequential Prime Minister for our country. He delivered Brexit, he delivered the vaccine, and he also delivered on standing up to Vladimir Putin and supporting the Ukrainians. As far as I'm aware, there are no other world leaders with a croissant named after them in Kyiv and a street named after them. And, you know, I was Boris's first cabinet supporter when he ran to be leader. I was proud to serve in his cabinet. I did not support the various shenanigans that went on.
No.
But the reality is, Nick, we are where we are.
Okay.
And I'm a person who believes in dealing with the here and now.
All right.
And I'm not, you know, a great person for looking backwards.
You mentioned world leaders. You've mentioned some other well-known political figures on the campaign. Nicola Sturgeon is an attention seeker. Mark Drakeford is the low-energy version of Jeremy Corbyn. This is Liz Truss's words.
Yeah, I still agree with myself.
The jury is out on whether Monsieur Macron is friend or foe. Is Donald Trump friend or foe?
Look, I am not going to comment.
Well, you're happy to comment about all the others.
Well, I didn't comment on Macron, actually. I said that...
you said the jury's out.
Well, that's not commenting as far as I can say. And,
return you to my question.
Donald
Trump, friend or foe?
Look, I am not going to comment on future potential presidential runners. We have to work with who is in the White House. The United States is our closest ally. I have met both President Trump when he was in office and President Biden. Now he's in office, and my priority is working to promote freedom and democracy around the world, and to work with our American allies against what are some very severe threats we're facing, including an assertive China, a belligerent Russia. You know, that is my priority.
So
and both the United States and France are freedom-loving democracies, and I will work with both of them, whoever the leader is.
Then I can take from that... Then I can take from that President Xi is a foe.
Well, what I would say about China...
You just described assertive China, so he must be a foe.
No, I'm not going to use the word foe, but what I will say is I am concerned about China's assertiveness. I do not believe that as a country we should become strategically dependent on China. I am working with our G7 allies to make sure that we build up our links with fellow freedom-loving democracies so we don't end up in the same position we were in with Russia, which is dependent on an authoritarian regime.
All right.
That is what I'm concerned about.
I want to tell everyone here and the audience on LBC, I've only got 2 more minutes with Liz Truss, so let me move to my final couple of questions. If in a few days' time you move into number 10, waiting for you.
No complacency
waiting
here,
for you is a £3,675 drinks trolley, a £7,000 rug, £2,250 worth of gold wallpaper. Are they all staying?
Well, it sounds like you've been to the number 10 flat, Nick.
I have not been to the number 10 flat, and irrespective of whether I had or not, I ask you again, the rug, the drinks trolley. Oh, and I can also do you a kitchen tablecloth for £500. Yes, £500. Will they be staying?
Well, all I can tell you, Nick, is first of all, I am from Yorkshire, so I do believe in value for money and not buying new things if you've already got things that are perfectly good to use. And secondly, I think with the in tray of issues that you've outlined earlier, I don't think I'm going to have time to think about the wallpaper or the flooring.
And finally, you will have time to, if you are successful, I know you want to say when, if you will have time to think, will you be happy being driven around in an Audi, a German car, rather than a British Jaguar, because apparently we can't make one for next year?
Well,
will you drive it? Will you be driven in an Audi?
Look, I know because in my current job as Foreign Secretary, I have police protection, and ultimately it is a decision for the police about the best car to use in the circumstances.
For another year.
Well, look, I will look into this issue in more detail, but fundamentally, well, look, I am going to focus.
What would be wrong with using the Jag for 12 more months while they build you another one and tell Germany to keep their Audi?
Maybe I'll employ you as my car consultant. But if I am given the honour of becoming our Prime Minister, I will be focusing on energy prices for consumers, how we get the British economy going, and how we deal with queues in the National Health Service. I will not be focusing on the car I'm in.
Before we go to your questions, your appreciation for Liz Truss, please, everybody.
Thank you.
And now.
Are we standing up for questions?
No, I think you can sit.
So we're going to sit down for questions.
And I'm going to point you in the right direction. That's the plan. Okay, everyone. Okay. All righty. The only slight issue, I love your energy, but I can't hear what I'm being told. But anyway, let's see. We're going to the first question. Daniel in the City of London, hopefully this way. Daniel?
This way.
Daniel?
This way.
Daniel? Over here, Daniel. Here we go. Daniel, over there, sir.
Thanks. David from the City of London.
That would be David from the City of London. Well, I'll be going then. Thanks very much indeed. Congratulations.
Hi, Liz. So I'm a business owner in the City of London, and currently the energy price cap only applies to households and not businesses. Many businesses are suffering the rapid increase in energy costs. How will you ensure that all businesses and ultimately all our high streets can survive the cost of energy crisis?
Liz Truss.
Well, first of all, I would run an unashamedly pro-business government. That is why I would keep corporation tax low, I'd reverse the national insurance rise, and I'd make sure that we are not putting undue regulations on business. And what we're also doing is unleashing investment by things like solvency, changing Solvency II, and so on. On energy, in the answer I gave to Nick earlier, you'll have heard me talking about supply of energy. And that's why I think dealing with supply is the answer to this problem. Because you're right, it's not just a problem for people, it's a problem for businesses with high energy costs. So I'll be looking across the board to make sure we're increasing supply and therefore dealing with the root cause of the issue rather than just putting a sticking plaster on. But I would absolutely be looking to act on business energy costs.
Thank you for that. Just a quick one. You'll be aware in France they've talked about the possibility of energy rationing. Can you rule that out, Liz Truss?
I do rule that out, yes.
You rule out energy rationing. OK. Tony in Knightsbridge, right ahead of you there, in a blue, in a Ready for Rishi shirt. This should be good. Go ahead.
I think he's biased, Nick. He's biased.
Here we go. Let's see how we go.
OK,
Liz Truss.
could you just comment on your attitude to helping Israel in the event it was attacked by another country?
Liz Truss.
Well, I am a huge supporter of Israel. In my time as Foreign Secretary, I have signed a strategic cooperation agreement with Yair Lapid, who was the Foreign Minister, now the Prime Minister of Israel. I have changed our position on the Human Rights Council at the United Nations to back Israel against some of the motions that were being put forward by other countries. And we will always stand with Israel and will work very closely with our allies to make sure Israel is safe. The number one priority has to be stopping Iran getting a nuclear weapon, and I'm absolutely focused on that.
Thank you. We have a question from Morley. Morley is here somewhere. Morley?
Hi, it's Morley and I'm from Broadland.
Can you wave at us, Morley? We can't quite see you. Where are... Okay, right up
Hello.
there. Okay, up there. Okay.
So, yeah, I'm all the way from Broadland in Norfolk, and I am their Youth Association chair. So we've heard a lot about saving our democracy, fighting for our freedom, and fighting this left-wing bias. Now, linking those 3 points together, and I'm sure every member in this audience tonight will agree with me that we need to stop pushing this ludicrous left-wing nonsense onto our children, and it is being preached to our youth. And Liz, what are you going to do to fight for our freedom in education? Because as part of our youth, and I know that this needs to change from experience. What are you going to do? Thank you.
Morley, can I just ask on a point of clarification, the left-wing nonsense, as you call it, can I just get a little more elaboration? Just a couple of examples that Liz Truss can tackle and the LBC audience.
We shouldn't be telling our children that a trans woman is a woman. And we are being taught this in schools, and it is not okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Liz Truss, I have to ask you, is a trans woman a woman?
No. I just said earlier a woman is a woman. Now, I believe in treating transgender people with respect. I think that's important. But we should not, confuse that with being clear in our language. And, some of the nonsense that has emanated, such as chest feeding, which we hear from the National Health Service, we've got to be talking in language that is clear and people understand across the country. And just on Morley's question, frankly, left-wing stuff being peddled in schools is not new. I grew up in Leeds in the 1980s and 90s, and I had plenty of teachers who were preaching about, criticising Mrs. Thatcher and preaching about all kinds of things. But I think what's happened more recently is it's become an orthodoxy. And this is what I mean about being proud to be conservatives. We have to fight the battle of ideas, and we have to stand up against this orthodoxy. Of course, as Prime Minister, I will make sure that that is the case in the public sector. But there's a broader cultural issue in our society about standing up against some of this identity politics. And fundamentally, I believe we should value people for their talents, their skills, their hard work, their character. We shouldn't value people because they're a woman, or because they're a man, or because they're transgender or not. And that is the policies the Labour Party are peddling.
Yeah,
and the left are peddling.
Okay, a couple of months ago.
But we have to fight it.
Okay.
We have to fight it.
Absolutely. Okay. A couple of months ago, I famously asked Sir Keir Starmer whether a woman could have a penis. He's still working out his response. I don't think I dare ask you somehow, so let's move instead. David is to my left. David, sir.
Smart motorways kill. They also cause long delays because they close lanes off when there's a breakdown, which is a problem for people who have to drive as part of their job. They also often impose very low speed limits, mandatory ones, much lower than necessary. So will you restore hard shoulders to all motorways? And in the meantime, will you change the speed limit from mandatory to advisory, to allow people the freedom to make their own judgment, to allow drivers to make their own judgment, the freedom to make their own judgment as to what is a safe speed, rather than having some overcautious man in a remote box sets the speed limit for them?
Okay, in context, campaigners claim, thank you very much, David, campaigners claim 75 lives have been lost on these so-called smart motorways, and there are 4 coroners in England and Wales who've requested a review. Liz Truss.
Yeah, I agree with you. I absolutely think that we need to review them and stop them if they are not working as soon as possible. And all the evidence I have agrees with the point you're making on smart motorways. And on speed limits, again, I would be prepared to look at that. I can't give you a precise answer on the point, but I do believe that the smart motorways experiment hasn't worked.
So you
and in
would
fact
stop,
has been.
Just for clarification, you would stop them?
Yes.
You would stop smart motorways. Okay, thank you very much indeed. We are now, and I sense there's a lot of support, we are looking for Daniel in Guildford. Daniel in Guildford, please wave at... here we go, behind. Here we go, sir. Thank you.
Hi, Liz.
Oh, you're Daniel. Right, we've got
Hiya.
you.
So, for years and years, multinational corporations have been avoiding billions and billions of in taxes that they owe to this country. For an example, in 2021, Apple's UK division paid just £800,000 in tax, despite making almost 971 million. How are you going to close these loopholes so that we get our fair share of tax from everyone?
Thank you. And of course, I just need to say, I must just say here for the listeners to LBC and the viewers on, of course, Global Player, that there's no suggestion this is just exploring tax opportunities rather than anything that breaks the law. I have to get out there because my bosses would be nervous otherwise. Liz Truss.
So one of the problems we have with our tax system is it's far too complicated. And actually, the more complicated a system is, the more it allows loopholes to emerge. So what I would do is, as well as making the immediate changes to tax, reversing national insurance, keeping corporation tax low, is have a full review of our tax system, looking at areas like business rates, looking at making sure tax is fair for families, because at the moment we have one of the least pro-family tax systems in the modern world, and also looking at how we have a simpler system so there are fewer loopholes that can be exploited. But what I worry about is what's happened is it's been a bit like a Christmas tree, our tax system. We find we create new tax bans, we create new taxes, companies find a way to, what was the word you used?
Circumvent or explore tax efficiencies.
He's got the legally right words there.
Well, I read about that.
And actually, we just end up hiring more and more people at HMRC to chase these companies up. And the solution is a simpler tax system that's fair for everyone.
Okay. And Treasury figures reported last week suggested that over the next 10 years, energy companies, again, no tax issue here, but are going to be making tens of billions of pounds of profits. Would you revisit the idea of another windfall tax, Liz Truss?
No.
No more windfall tax. Okay. Andy is in West Acton. And hello, sir. Blue shirt, red tie.
Hi, Liz. As a British Ukrainian, I'm truly... Thank you. I am truly inspired and grateful to Boris Johnson and the British government for all the support you've been providing Ukrainian people. The war continues, and Putin's armies continue to butcher innocent women and children. When you become Prime Minister, in the short term, what specific measures will you take in specifically providing multiple launch rocket systems to Ukraine? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I mean, you and your countrymen are an inspiration to the world. And, I feel very strongly that you are fighting for freedom and democracy, not just for your own country, but for the whole of Europe. And we owe it to you to do all we can to support you. And, I am proud that we were the first European country to send weapons to Ukraine. We are training up Ukrainian soldiers. We continue to send weapons, and we continue to work with our allies around the world. And you're right about the multiple launch rocket systems. Ukraine needs more of them. You need more heavy weapons to be able to fight the Russians effectively. And as Foreign Secretary, I have done all I can to work with my colleague Ben Wallace to make sure you've got that support, but also to encourage our allies to provide that support as well. And some people say, and we also need to put more sanctions on. That's absolutely clear. We need to do more to cut off Putin's supply of revenue that he is using to perpetrate the war in Ukraine. But the people who say that this costs too much are completely wrong, because the cost of doing nothing is much, much worse. Because I believe that Putin will not stop. He would not stop at Ukraine. He will go into Eastern Europe and threaten global security. And it also sends a signal, frankly, for other authoritarian regimes around the world about what is or isn't acceptable. This is why it is strategically vital that Putin is defeated in Ukraine.
I think I read that if you are successful, President Zelensky would be your first overseas call. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why would that be? Tradition, and again, a lot of support. Why would that be? Why would it not be, say, President Biden? And when do you think you'd be able to make your first trip to Kyiv?
Well, I'm not going to sort of go into a potential diary at this stage because it's always dangerous to, to predict things in advance. But President Zelensky is an inspiration. And what I want to show the Ukrainians is that they will continue to get the United Kingdom's full support. And I know how important it is to President Zelensky and how important it is to the Ukrainian government. And that is why I would aim to do it as early as possible to demonstrate that commitment.
This calendar year, if you can.
Well, as soon as possible is what I will say
next.
next.
It's the final question from the floor, I'm afraid, Liz Truss. We go behind you a little bit. Moody, I understand, in Watford. Moody?
Hi, good evening, guys.
Hello.
So I run a childcare nursery in London. England has some of the tightest childcare ratios in Europe. We've got the third highest childcare costs in the developed world. Would you be bold and brave and think about reducing the childcare ratios for England? And would you consider scrapping business rates for nurseries in line with Scotland?
Well, Moody, it's very, very good to hear from you, and I will certainly make sure that if I'm successful, I'm in touch with you about your ideas about what we can do.
But to give you some background,
it is a priority.
Do you know what the ratio is for young children?
Well, I know all this because I was childcare minister.
So for 2-year-olds?
And I tried to pursue those reforms.
So for 2-year-olds?
And they were kiboshed by Nick Clegg,
Okay.
who has run away to California because he doesn't want to face what's going on here in Britain.
So you know that for 2-year-olds it is 1 adult to...
I think it's 3 or 4 children.
4. It's 1 to 4. What would you seek to take that to?
I'm not going to go into the details of the policy, and anyone who's interested can see what I was proposing when I was childcare minister back when Nick Clegg blocked the reforms. But what I'm absolutely clear about is childcare is too expensive for parents across our country. We do need to reform the way we do things. We need to also reform the government funding because currently it comes from 3 different departments, Treasury, DWP, DFE, and it would be an absolute priority for me to help the brilliant people who work in nurseries, but also help parents who are struggling with the cost of living.
Okay, just to finally then, if when you make your first trip to the White House, both Nick Clegg and Donald Trump ask to take you for a cocktail...
Oh my God, what a choice.
Yeah, with whom would you share your cocktail?
Well, I think I'd focus on meeting President Biden.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, your appreciation for your candidate and your Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss.
Thank you.